Coming up next on Words and Numbers, malfeasance in the markets.
Of ballets and street brawls.
Those stupid Russians.
And whatever the main episode's going to be.
And all kinds of other things.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
I ran across a YouTuber, Caleb Hammer. Have you seen this guy?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that guy.
Yeah,
I love how he yells. I love how he yells at people who don't know what bills are.
I don't understand how he gets away with yelling at them. I mean, it's almost as if he's promised to pay them something if they stay on the whole episode.
No, I looked into this a little bit because I couldn't imagine who would be putting up with his nonsense. But apparently the process to get on the show is long and difficult. So people know what they're getting into, they sign up for it, and then they break their backs to get on the show.
Yeah, and he, I've seen a couple of clips, or a handful of clips from his show, and he berates, justifiably so, but he berates his guests. He's a real jerk, except there was one clip where the girl, he said something, and she started crying. And you could see him change. He's actually a sweet guy. He said, oh, no, we can stop. It's okay. This is just part of the thing. It was really sweet.
I like it when he yells at people because, if you're so confused that you can't manage to take in more than you lay out, not every now and again, but habitually, I don't know what to tell you. You need to be yelled at. You should have been yelled at years ago.
Oh, okay. So for background, if for those who haven't seen Caleb Hammer's, do you call it a show?
And let me stop you right there because I'm going to send him this and he should come on Words and Numbers to tell us all.
I got on to their thing as soon as I started watching his thing. I got onto his thing and sent him a note and said, hey, come on Words and Numbers and talk about stuff. But here's the thing. His show ostensibly is about personal finance. So he gets people on there who have personal finance problems. They're all young people. And he walks them through stuff. But you're absolutely right. It is astounding. People getting on there who are already, they're against the wall. And they go out and take a 10% loan on a $50,000 car. What the heck is going? Anyway, I'm channeling my inner Caleb. But here's the thing. He's pretty hardcore libertarian. And I would say of his episodes, which run like an hour and a half to hour 45 minutes, I'd say easily 80% of that is him talking about, with the guest, some libertarian something before he ever gets into the finances. And here is how I discovered him. I ran across this clip. And we'll show you the section I'm thinking of, and you'll see why it's interesting. It's educational, right? So don't get me wrong. He's got a lot of good information arguments, but he's going head to head with a socialist guest who has at best an elementary school level understanding of basic economics. Forget about the theory, just facts of economics. And it's like I'm watching that, and I'm thinking about his show versus Words and Numbers, and the number of followers he has, which is gargantuan compared to Words and Numbers. And it's like a street brawl compared to a ballet. The street brawl is far less organization, far less meaningful substance, but understandably more entertaining. I'm not saying we should go in that direction. I'm just saying I can see why he has 10x the number of followers.
Well,
but that kind of thing I would imagine burns out pretty quickly.
Well, I don't know. Some of this stuff is evergreen. For example, everybody, when you were doing it, Danny, our beloved producer now, they cut out all those sections of me just berating you.
Yeah, but we actually do get to, well, yes, that is correct.
I mean, that's gold hitting the floor. And yet, I'm not allowed to speak my mind. My freedom of speech is being curtailed here.
Well, I think there's a difference. There's a difference between, making it mostly about the berating and a little bit of economics and political theory on the side versus making it about the economics and political theory with a little bit of berating on the side.
I would like it to be the former.
But none of this is my point. My point's the following. This guest that he had on, who doesn't go by her real name, so I'm not even going to say it, his guest on this particular clip complains that the rich aren't paying but should pay their fair share of taxes. And they go on and on about this. And of course, he's asking her how much are they currently paying. She has no idea. But as the conversation goes on, she's doubling down on the rich aren't paying their fair share. They need to pay. It comes out that she hasn't paid her taxes since 2024.
I'm not one to cast stones.
And Caleb, understandably, he's aghast at the hypocrisy.
I haven't paid my taxes yet.
You haven't paid your taxes. You haven't paid your taxes. You're a taker, not a giver. You're a f***ing champagne socialist. You live it up. You don't pay a single f***ing thing in taxes to actually go to the social programs. Then you're saying people need to go pay more money. You don't even know.
I'm not paying for imperialism.
I'm watching this, and at a visceral level, I share that emotion of, this revealed hypocrisy. And I would imagine most of our listeners who would see it would as well. But I want to point out something. Just a few episodes ago, and I think it was more than one episode, we talked about Thomas Jefferson's hypocrisy in penning the words, all men are created equal, and yet he owns slaves. And of course, people point to this hypocrisy. And those of us in the classical liberal tradition say, okay, yes, he owns slaves. Yes, that's a problem, but that's completely ancillary to the question. The question is, how much truth is there in this statement, all men are created equal? Let's think about this statement because this is really important. Yeah, the fact of his owning slaves is important as well, but it's a completely separate thing. These are two items, not one item.
Right. And here's the thing. It's either correct or it isn't.
Right. Yeah. The statement is either correct or not. Yeah.
If it's incorrect, then slavery as an institution is perfectly well and good.
Yes.
If it's correct as a statement, slavery as an institution is completely immoral and must be done away with.
And look at what you're doing. You're asking about the truth value of Jefferson's statement, which has nothing to do with whether he owns slaves.
Nothing to do with Jefferson at all, other than the fact that he happened to be the guy who wrote it down.
Right. Now, come back to Caleb Hammer and his guest. I'm astounded at the guest's hypocrisy of, on the one hand, saying the rich aren't paying their fair share, and yet she's not paying taxes at all. And I'm thinking, okay, there's this hypocrisy that you have revealed. Clearly, you don't believe in what you're saying because we can see by your own behavior. Therefore, I'm going to dismiss your entire argument.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Maybe like many, if not most socialists, she thinks her fair share is zero.
Possibly, but she didn't say that.
She
presented it as I should be paying taxes, and I actually haven't.
Well,
she did not make it as a principled statement of I believe I should not pay taxes, and therefore I'm not.
Far be it from me to make the arguments of socialists any easier for them. Socialism, as a rule, is one of the most terrible ideas that humanity has ever come up with. I mean, it's just dreadful. And if you want any proof, just go look at every socialist society there's ever been.
Yeah, that's all correct, but that's also ancillary to where I'm going.
Well, you want to talk about hypocrisy, I would say that all public socialists are hypocrites because what they really think, and I believe this to my core, what they really think is that working in the fields will be for the other people. That somehow they're part of the intelligentsia that will tell those poor, besodden workers what they must do and what their quotas will be, and their lives be damned.
But notice what happens here, and this came home to me as I'm watching Caleb Hammer's stuff. My observation is people, and I include myself here, people appear to separate a speaker's hypocrisy from the speaker's argument when they accept the argument. It's when you reject the argument that you're very quick to conflate the hypocrisy with the argument. She's never paid her taxes, therefore why are we even listening to her when she says the rich should pay their fair share? Well, that's the same thing as Jefferson owned slaves. Why should we ever listen to him? So I'm throwing this out to you kind of as a question about human behavior. Do you think it's the case? Because I've got a follow-up. Do you think it's the case that when people fundamentally agree with the argument, they're more apt to separate the hypocrisy from the argument, and when they reject the argument, they're more apt to conflate the two?
I think that's probably pretty fair. I'm sure I could come up with counterexamples, but by and large, I'm sure that's pretty fair.
That struck me as at a gut level right as well. But then it opened up a very disturbing corollary. And the corollary, if indeed that statement is true, that if you reject the argument, you're more apt to point to the hypocrisy as means of rejecting the argument. If that's the case, then it would then follow that people who dismiss Jefferson as a hypocrite fundamentally don't believe that all people are created equal.
Well, that's the point I always make to them, that you really only have these two choices. It's a yes or it's a no. Pick. And I've never, when I prod them, I have never had anybody pick no. They always pick yes. Now, I think the more difficult corollary is one that we've, dare I say, learned to live with over the last 20, 30 years. And it comes full as flower under Trump, but I don't want to diminish how bad it was under Biden or Obama for that matter. The others maybe less so, but those three chiefly, no matter what comes out of their mouths, people just say, well, yep, that must be true because my guy said it.
Right, yes.
And I think
Yep.
you're looking at the same kind of animal when you think about this sort of thing too. And really what it boils down to is an unwillingness to think critically.
Mm-hmm.
And look, political scientists have been studying this for years. Party identification is a form of political shorthand, right? You find the group that you're more aligned with than not, and then that's who you are. But it's a relatively recent phenomena where we're expected to agree in some with everything the guy at the top says.
Right.
Right. And that's, I think, very distressing. I can't remember a politician. I dare say there has never been a politician with whom I had 100% agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, you're probably an idiot. You probably you are probably allergic to free thinking if you agree with not only any politician, but any other human being.
Right, if you agree with 100% of what the politician is saying, because a politician is going to stand for hundreds of things simultaneously.
I mean, look, Ant, you and I are almost the same human being in a lot of respects, and we have rather significant disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, we probably agree on 85% of everything.
Yeah. Oh, more than that, I would think. But still.
Which is probably too much for any two grown men, right, when it comes right down to it. But the disagreements are such that we are at each other's throats from time to time. And it should ever be so. If you find yourself agreeing with somebody 100% of the time, you gave up thinking.
Yeah, there's no room for growth there. How do you become better? How do you challenge your own thinking?
And how do you determine when you're being taken for a ride?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, by definition, what politicians aim to do.
Right.
But believe it or not, Ann, I also wanted to talk about socialism a little bit today. And this dips in And by the way, welcome back. We missed you. Although our
That's
friend,
right. I saw the episode with Wes. You two did a great job.
the connoisseur of foolishness,
Right.
did himself well, acquitted himself finely on the show. And one of the things that he and I talked about was this business of the United States government owning stakes in corporations.
Right.
And I've been thinking about it a little more since Wes and I recorded, and I dug up a little bit. And did you know that at this point, the United States government owns significant shares, minority shares, but significant, in at least 30 different United States corporations?
Is it that many?
Wow. 30. And the reason why I started thinking about it today was because I can kind of see it coming again. Our fearless leader and big toe Donald Trump this very morning came out and said, and I quote, Chevron and ExxonMobil are, quote, making too much money, unquote, and should return some of their profits back to the public.
They do. It's called dividends.
It is called dividends. It's also called stock appreciation. There's any number of ways you could look into this. But boy, this sure does sound like Donald Trump's about to make a move to take a public stake in these companies too.
It sounds a lot like Bernie Sanders.
Well, it sounds exactly like Bernie Sanders. And we've been saying for a while now that the difference between Trump's policies and Sanders are minimal. Now, the delivery mechanism, right, the words that tumble out of their mouths are different. But where the rubber meets the road, they're functionally the same. He goes on, when you look at one company where they made 12 times what they made the year before, they ought to give some of that back to the public. Now, I did some digging. It doesn't look like they've made 12 times what they did the year before. They're doing better. I specifically looked up Exxon rather than Chevron. I figured it's a good enough proxy. And profits are, in fact, up. But there's, as is always the case, a whole raft of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into any of them here, but it's complicated because, of course, it's complicated. And what's the alternative? Would Donald Trump be happier if United States corporations did not turn a profit? That seems to be a rather counterproductive thing for the president of the United States to hold.
I'm just looking up ExxonMobil's profit margin here. And you want to take a guess? I got a whole bunch of numbers here.
Well, sadly, I've already looked into this, so I've got more than an educated guess.
This is from 2014 to the present. It's quarterly data, and this is profit margin. So this is profit divided by revenues. So picture, roughly speaking, of every buck you hand over to ExxonMobil, and actually you don't hand the bucks to Exxon. Well, I guess you do, depending on where you buy it. But for every buck that ExxonMobil gets, what fraction of that dollar is profit versus not? And the numbers here range, they're almost all single digit. There are a couple of years here where they cross the 10% mark. Most of these are 6%, 7%. There is
usually
12.
6.
There's
usually
one
6 or 7.
Yeah, during the height of inflation, 16% and 19%, and those were not per year; those were quarters. But then it goes back down to by 2023 to under 10%. Yeah. So, and you can say, let's just take an average here. Oh, by the way, I just saw this. The fourth quarter of 2020, negative 45%.
Ouch.
Yeah.
I guess people stopped driving.
Yeah, average this out, and I don't know what the number is going to come to, but let's be generous here and say it comes out to 10% profit margin. And you could say, well, that's 10 cents on the dollar that we could be redistributing back to the people, until you stop and say, wait a minute, there's tremendous risk in owning and operating this business. That 10% profit margin goes to compensate the investors for taking on that risk. You
And
start taking
now
that. Yeah, you start taking that away, and you're removing the incentive to have an ExxonMobil in the first place.
Well, if you want to have a good bit of fun right now, what's the similar margin for, I don't know, Alphabet, Meta, and Apple?
Oh, Apple's last I saw was pretty high.
It's jaw-dropping.
Oh, yeah. Net profit margin, Apple 27%. So it puts it at roughly 3 times ExxonMobil.
Now do Meta and Alphabet.
Meta, 30%, and Alphabet is, oh boy,
There you go.
55% profit margin.
So, I'm not exactly sure what the hell Donald Trump's problem is, except I am. And here's what his problem is. Gas costs a lot right now at the pump. When gas costs a lot, people remember that he promised gas would be cheaper. So he needs to blame the companies that make the gas, which is what he's doing. Is it that simple? Yes, it is that simple.
You and I ran the numbers on this the last time gas went
long time
$5 a gallon.
Time ago.
And it was, as I recall, of every dollar you spent on gas back then, roughly 5-6 cents made it to the oil companies.
We figured it at 3.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Whatever the number was, by far, the entities who make the most money on gas sales are state and federal governments.
Yep, state and federal governments. That's right. States more than the feds in almost every case, if not every case.
Yeah, this was... we were in Pennsylvania at the time that you and I wrote this, and Pennsylvania had just raised its gas tax to, I believe, 60 cents a gallon. 60. Mm-hmm. And the federal tax is 18 cents a gallon. This doesn't cover 20. This is way more than ExxonMobil's getting.
20 and 6 times what ExxonMobil was getting, respectively.
Yeah.
So, as is always the case, when politicians start talking about gas prices, I'm left with the exact same comment. Get in line and kiss my ass, because you're the problem.
Now let me hit right off a counter-argument that people give. And they say, well, yeah, the state and the federal government is taking all of this money, but in exchange for that money, they're providing roads, for example. Well, hang on. That same argument applies to ExxonMobil. The money that ExxonMobil's taking in, which is way less than what the federal government is taking in, it's using that money to provide gasoline and the infrastructure and the refining and shipping it across the ocean.
Boats and stuff.
Yeah.
And boats are really expensive.
You started off by saying that the federal government has taken ownership in corporations. Mm-hmm. And I wrote on my card, why? It's not taking... It's not taking majority ownership.
I don't know why, Ant, but I do know that that's socialism. State ownership of the means of production is the exact definition of socialism. So for those of you who want to tell me that Joe Biden was a socialist and Donald Trump is not, Donald Trump is facilitating state ownership of the means of production, and Joe Biden didn't.
Yeah, and that's not to say Joe Biden wasn't a socialist.
No,
right? All of those who are going to write in and say we have Trump derangement syndrome for simply stating the fact.
I don't have Trump derangement syndrome.
Biden is equally bad.
No, he's not equally bad. Trump is worse because Trump is involving the United States government in state ownership of the means of production, which is straight from the playbook of Karl Marx.
I want to go back to the why, James. The government, it's going to make some capital gains or dividends or whatever, but that's going to be a drop in the ocean compared to the tax revenue. This is not a money play.
This is about control.
It's not taking a majority stake, but you don't need a majority stake to control where a company moves. You just need a large enough minority stake.
A, it's about control. And B, the government will be picking winners and losers. And when the government picks winners, it's going to pick the companies it has shares in.
Yep.
And this queers the free market to such a degree that I don't know that we can say we have much of a free market anymore.
Yeah, and this becomes a huge problem, particularly now with Social Security seeing its demise. The younger generations, the millennials, the Gen Z, are going to have to be relying on 401ks, IRAs. They're going to have to build up their own savings. And this is going to severely limit financial markets' abilities to generate income and gains over time, because financial markets will no longer be focused on what is financially viable, what is profitable. Instead, they're going to start to be more and more focused on what is more politically expedient.
Right. And in the end, nothing good will come of any of this. And when it all collapses and it causes untold problems down the road, everybody's going to smack themselves on the forehead and say, well, who knew this was going to happen?
Yeah.
Well, we did, just like always. We warned you, you didn't listen, and here we are.
Before we go on, James, not that anybody cares anymore, but I got to ask the question, is it constitutional for the federal government to purchase shares in a private company?
No.
Yeah.
Why would that stop anybody ever? And
I just wanted to hear you say it.
Sadly, none of this constitutes the foolishness of the week, which we now tumble into headlong. And tumble would be the right word, because I want to talk about the reflecting pool. Have you been following the hijinks that is the reflecting pool on the
I have not.
National
Last
Mall?
I heard, somebody walked by and pulled a piece of paint off it and somehow got accused of causing the whole problem.
Yeah, that turns out, shockingly, that's a bunch of bullshit. We're going to get back to Donald Trump here, because he plays in this story, and he plays in it twice. The first way that he plays in it is that he nominated that Fox News moron. What was her first name? Jeanine Pirro. Remember her?
I don't recall.
She would go on Fox News and tell everybody what a brilliant lawyer she was all the time, and then a bunch of foolishness would spout out of her mouth like water through a fountain. He nominated her as U.S. Attorney for D.C., which puts her in control of all kinds of legal machinations. And the reflecting pool, sadly fell under her purview. And, we're going to go get those guys who were vandalizing it, and, all of the rhetoric that came flying out of her stupid mouth. And then quietly, about a week ago, 3-4 days ago, she dropped the case. Because it turns out people weren't vandalizing it. It was just shoddy construction.
Yep.
And there was no way in hell that a jury of even the dumbest Americans was going to agree with anything put on in that case indicating otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And then the President of the United States had himself a world-class hissy fit. And now he's threatening to remove Jeanine Pirro.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, because she didn't clear it with him first.
Wow.
That's a level of micromanaging that would make Jimmy Carter blush.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter, probably the biggest micromanager in the history of the Oval Office. So now I sit back and wonder what our MAGA friends, the people who send me the TDS newsletter that they send me each and every week, they all
I don't
told
get a
me
newsletter. You get a newsletter.
Oh, I get multiple newsletters. They all told me that Jeanine Pirro was a genius. They all told me that Trump is a genius. And at least one of those things is incorrect as of this moment. Now, I would contend that they're both incorrect, but at least one of those things must be incorrect. I'm guessing they're all going to have a problem with Jeanine Pirro because to this day, even though his approval rating by 2 polls last week is down to 32%, there is still that hardcore base who just can't see it within themselves to lay any blame at his feet for anything.
Yeah, and I think our friends on the far right who are doing this, they're shooting themselves in the foot, because if they were to come out and acknowledge the instances in which Trump has gotten it wrong when he's done something that he shouldn't have done, if they were more honest about it, when it came time for, oh, good Lord, what's the vice president's name?
J.D. Vance.
Thank you.
I can't blame you for having forgotten it.
When it comes time for J.D. Vance to run, and those same people on the far right are going to stand behind him, I think a lot of Americans would listen to them because they were honest about Trump. Now, the fact that they aren't being honest about Trump and they are going to stand behind J.D. Vance, I think is going to hurt J.D. Vance.
I don't think they're going to stand behind J.D. Vance. I think J.D.
You don't
Vance
think so?
will have this. I don't think he'll have the support of much of anyone by the time it comes right down to it. I suspect that it's Marco Rubio's to lose. And we'll see, right? Any number of things can happen in 2+ years. That might as well be a million years in political time,
Right.
Especially during the Trump administration. But Marco Rubio, look, every politician who joined the administration sold his soul to do it. Let's just be honest. Rubio knew why he was doing it, right? It wasn't to cotton up to Trump. It was to get the big chair.
Mm-hmm.
So I know why he did what he did. You can tell it weighs on his soul. You see him moping around everywhere. And yet he does want the presidency. And he is best positioned right this second on the Republican side to get it. I still hold out hope that that giant John Fetterman throws his hat in the ring and makes a mess of everything. That's my that is my absolute dream, is that big John Fetterman decides maybe it's Fetterman's turn to be president. Because as you and I have discussed many a time, the number of people who are independent now dwarfs the number of people who are Democrats and Republicans combined.
Yeah, they're just waiting for someone to come along who's centrist and reasonable.
And Big John might be that guy.
Yeah.
And John, if you're listening, you agreed to come on this podcast once upon a time before you had your brain incident, and the offer still stands, and the brain incident is in the past. So come on by. We'd love to have a chat with you.
That's right. We came that close to having him on. He was scheduled to come on Words and Numbers, and he had.
I think it's like a week or two
problem.
before
this
his
was when he was
stroke.
lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And would have loved to have had him on then, would really love to have him on now. And unlike everybody else, we would ask respectful, if pointed questions. So there you go. And I've got one more for us. It fell into the uncategorizable category. Can something be uncategorizable and in a category? I think I've
The category of no.
I think I've just made one of my very rare errors in the English language.
Can the set of all sets contain itself? I don't know.
Yeah, can God make a rock so big he himself can't lift it? Blah, 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 blah. But anyway, it's those Russians. God, is there every time you think that they've exhausted that stockpile of dopey that they could possibly say in public, another one of them says, I don't know how to say beer in Russian, but hold my beer. And
hold my vodka.
I'm going to read you a paragraph, if I may, and this is from the Express out of the UK. Russian state media has broadcast a chilling threat towards Britain and other Western leaders, with a political commentator claiming they, quote, keep living only for as long as we allow it, as he urged Moscow to confront its enemies through the language of strength. The remarks were made during the Russian program Full Contact, hosted by Kremlin-backed broadcaster Vladimir Slyovov, name I can't pronounce. So the Russians, do you remember when they had that 3-day war in the Ukraine?
Yeah, right.
Well, 3 years later, they're still losing it. Now they think what they really should do is stick their fingers in the eyes of the West, saying that you're alive but by our grace, seemingly forgetting that all of our nuclear stockpiles are pointed right at them. All they have to do is sneeze, and we'll wipe them out. Right now, mutual assured destruction being what it is means that it would take a world-class moron to launch a nuclear weapon. But I'm not so certain that the former Soviet Union isn't chock full of world-class morons.
Right.
So now they're threatening all of us with extinction.
What gave rise to this threat?
Who the hell knows? And that's just it with Russians, right? They lose their minds, they say a bunch of nonsense, and then we're all supposed to pretend that they're civilized. But they're not, and they should cut it out. And when people say things like, well, the U.S. shouldn't involve itself in foreign wars, I am deeply sympathetic to that point of view. Deeply. However, when the Russians invade Ukraine, that's a foreign war we should get involved in. We should be sending every ounce of artillery we can send to the Ukrainians. Because if and when Russia takes over Ukraine, Poland is next. Bet on it. Putin wants to resurrect the old boundaries of the Soviet Union. He's convinced that Russia, as such, is, how to put it, he's convinced that a land invasion of Russia is not out of the question. And it's less out of the question without the concentric circles of defense that the former Soviet republics provided the mother country. So what's he trying to do? He's trying to recreate those former boundaries that gave Russia a bit of an impasse to get through before bad things could happen. And fine, Ukraine is not a NATO ally. Poland is. And Russian munitions have already exploded in Poland multiple times. What makes you think that's going to stop? So am I in favor of getting involved in foreign wars? No. Am I in favor of stymieing Russian aggression as it rolls towards the West? Bet your ass I am. And every other realist out there is saying the exact same thing. And this is one of those libertarian purity tests that I always fail, right? Because there are certain times when having a military is a very good thing, and using it is a very good thing. And now, with Russia saber-rattling towards the West, suck it.
See, the thing that bothers me here, I guess, is less about what's going on militarily than what's going on economically. I'm just looking up right now. Yeah, Russia's per capita GDP. Oh, wow, that's higher than I would have thought. Purchasing power parity equivalence is $52,000? Huh.
Yeah, but now ask yourself how much of that money is going to the war effort in Ukraine.
Yeah, okay, all right. So that's a good question. Here's my point. I think particularly with modern economies, the most certain way to prevent wide-scale war like you're envisioning is economic growth.
Yeah, I agree, but
the more people have to lose, the less likely they are to get involved.
Couldn't agree more, but when Putin decides he's going to invade Ukraine, that's that.
Yeah, if you get a crazy person in charge in such a position that nobody else is able to get rid of said crazy person, yeah, now kind of all bets are off at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons why, when we were younger, China was a big threat militarily to the U.S. And China remains probably even larger military power than it was back then. But I tend to regard them as much less of a threat, precisely because they're becoming much richer. And the richer they become, the more they've got to lose.
Well, they're becoming much richer because are they our biggest trading partner? I think they are.
I don't know no, Canada's our largest trading partner.
Is Canada?
But I believe, but China, I believe, is in the top 3 or top 5, yeah.
Our economies are intertwined. And as long as our economies are intertwined, there will be no hostility.
Yep.
Now, we may have to worry about what kind of China pulls in Taiwan, but they're not going to pull that at Cape Cod. Right. And you just know this. And, the other thing is that China's demographics are just disastrous. And I read something this very morning, as a matter of fact, that marriage is down in China, marriage licenses. So something you can count, something that the Chinese can in fact count, that they can't really fake the way they fake a lot of their data. And faking data is a little too strong. They're just not particularly sophisticated in how they collect it. But marriage licenses, that's not something that presents any difficulty at all. That's a binary yes, no, just check the box, count the numbers. They're down 6% this year.
6, yeah.
And they're down every other year for as far back as the eye can see.
Yeah, and that's what scares me about China. Its population is projected to decline dramatically, like 40% by the end of the century.
It's not going to decline.
It's already collapsed.
It's going to collapse. There will be famine in China. I know that the Ehrlichs and the Malthuses of this world don't like to hear this kind of thing. Overpopulation is not our problem, right? And the more population,
is a problem.
The more population you have, the better the population eats. That may be counterintuitive for some, but it's so undeniable once you take a look at the numbers that all you have to do is look into it once. You'll never bother looking into it again. More people globally equals a better life globally. Now, when the Chinese, when their population is halved, as it's going to be by the time you get to about 2100, they're going to be in free fall.
Yep.
And they're going to starve. And I take no joy in saying this. The Chinese are not my enemy. I don't think ill of the Chinese. There are some things the Chinese do I could live without. That's literally true of everyone. I want what's best for them the same way they want what's best for them. But they're not going to get what's best for them. They're going to die. They're going to die wholesale.
There is
it all starts with that one-child policy.
It does, yeah.
And
with the one-child policy, and you're selecting males predominantly, and now you don't have the raw materials.
Yep, and it was idiocy of the first rank to think that limiting population growth would do you anything but harm, but then they did limit population growth, and the minute they did, all the young people aborted baby girls because they all wanted sons. And now there are a busload of men who will never find a mate because there aren't enough women.
Yeah.
And you see how one child that became then 2 children is going to end up in practice being 1 child. But you need 2.1 children to maintain a population per childbearing woman. You need 2.1. They're not even close, and they're going to get further away from it every year.
I think there's a, I don't want to say hope, maybe it is hope. China's right next door to India. India's population is projected to continue rising past 2100. And so India is going to start to have an overpopulation problem. Now, we said overpopulation isn't a problem, except that when the number of people you have is growing faster than your infrastructure, that can become a problem. Now, infrastructure will eventually,
quite some time.
Yeah, infrastructure will eventually catch up, and long term you're going to be better off, but there's going to be some short term pain there. Enter China. If all of a sudden China, which has, at least in its along its coast, has quite well developed infrastructure, and finds itself in need of population, and here right next door is India that is burgeoning with population.
We asked the question in the last couple of years, can Turks in fact become Italians? And now we're going to have to ask the question, maybe, can Indians in fact become Chinese?
Yeah.
My guess is probably not. I think that Chinese xenophobia probably eclipses China's understanding of its own needs.
Maybe. I'm going to quote one of my favorite professors, who's long dead now, Roy Mills. I took Roy Mills is one of these professors that there were a couple of them. I would take whatever they were teaching. It didn't matter what. Their names on the syllabus, I'm taking them. Roy Mills was one of those. He taught history, and his expertise was China. And he used to say, China has never been conquered. And he then peels that statement apart, and he says, yes, conquerors have come in, and they have won over the Chinese armies, and they've taken up residence and all of this, but every single one of them has adopted Chinese culture. So 2-3 generations down the road, the invaders are Chinese. Hence his statement, China can never be conquered. So
the Indians
if that holds true,
Chinese,
let all those Indians in, because 2-3 generations, they're going to be Chinese.
We'll see. I don't know. I think we're about to have a global depopulation problem, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly. So
well, yes and no, because the guy who's just coming out of the dugout is Africa.
Well, and look, all I'll say about that is I do not now, nor have I ever had a firm understanding of what's going on in Africa, right? I'm just, Africa could turn on a dime and become an economic juggernaut.
Yeah.
The fact that it hasn't for these hundreds of years indicates that maybe they're not terribly interested.
Maybe they've been stymied by, other powers coming in and carving them up. I don't know. It's not my expertise.
Yeah, sure, but at the end of the day, they've got to get their together and do it themselves. And
right.
They don't show any great interest in getting that done. They do show a lot of interest in taking chunks out of each other, which is not the smart road ahead. Now, if they got their act together, it could be quite remarkable. And I would love to see it. I mean, Africa's been the poor man of the world since I was a boy, and in fact, hundreds of years before that. So it would be nice to see them make a turn. And there are some success stories that you can point to in Africa, right? I mean, I'd like to go to Kenya right now. There are any number of smaller stories that are trending in the right direction.
Yep.
Whether they still do or not, I don't know. But maybe that's the happy/cheerful note that we should just end on today, because today's really been a run through the muck and the mire. Let's try and find something happy to talk about next week if we can. Maybe next week we can talk about how the Red Sox have finally overtaken the Yankees for second place in the AL East. That would be the greatest thing.
You're going to have to invite Wes on as a co-host again, because I have nothing to add there.
I don't think Wes gives a shit about the Red Sox either. I'll invite Jessica Sims Bowen on. She and I have been to Fenway Park together. Her bona fides are not under question here. Anyway, until next time, Ant, I would remind you and all of the other people within the sound of our voices it's hot out, right? It's really hot. It's like 107 here today. And I was out a little earlier, and people are a little chippy when it gets to be 107. And I'll just remind you that it's 107 for you, but it's also 107 for everybody else. So maybe just try and be a little nicer. Other people might follow suit. You never know. It could start a trend. See you next weekend.
See you next time, James.